Yo, 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 friends. Welcome to The Thoughtful Bro. I'm so psyched to be back after a few weeks off with my main man here, Alexander Sammartino. I can't wait to talk about this book with him, Last Acts. It's not only a great book, but you will soon find that Alexander is a really interesting guy to talk to about kind of like the theory and purpose of fiction writing and storytelling and the novel. So I'm just really psyched for this conversation today. Before we get started, a few words as always. Here on The Thoughtful Bro, we are live streaming on Facebook and YouTube. We are here to talk about what makes great books tick, what makes great authors tick. We are an all-volunteer initiative at A Mighty Blaze. We're connecting writers and readers virtually. We're never asking for money unless we're doing one of our biannual fundraisers. But normally we're not asking for money. And if you want to show the love to A Mighty Blaze or The Thoughtful Bro, the only thing we ask you to do is click like, tell your friends about us, repost us, retweet us, all the things. Or one other idea for your hard-earned dollars and cents, please spend your hard-earned money on novels about fathers and sons trying to save each other in the desert, books that give you all the guns, the drugs, and the feels, books like Last Acts by Alexander Sammartino. If you want to ask Alexander a question, please post it in the chat. As always, we'll get to the questions at the end. And now, a little bit more about Alexander. His career as a novelist is off to a hot start. He's already been named a National Book Foundation 5 Under 35 Honoree. He was a finalist for the New York Public Library's Young Lion Award for fiction. And his debut novel, Last Acts, was praised by none other than George Saunders as, quote, honest, high-wire, virtuosic writing. And the New York Times called it hilarious and exceptional. But my favorite blurb, my blurb that really takes the cake on this one, is from Mary Carr, who called Last Acts, wait for it, Tony Soprano meets Samuel Beckett. Like, if I had that blurb, I would just die and go to heaven, Alexander. Welcome to The Thoughtful Bro.
Thanks so much for having me, Mark. Seriously, an honor to be here, man. Really appreciate it.
100%, man. 100%. Thank you for writing this book. It came out a year ago. We were talking a moment ago in the green room. Like, it came out just about a month before my book came out last year. So I can't believe that I missed this book. It was it's like a father-son story, guns, opioid crisis, father and son trying to connect. I mean, this is like so my wheelhouse. It hurts. But I somehow missed it in the kind of flood of books that we all are living in. But I'm so glad I'm seeing it now on the paperback side. I think you said you're not doing like a ton of publicity around it now, but I'm just kind of curious, like, just take a look back at like the year since it came out and like, how's that ride been for a debut novelist?
Been incredible, man. A lot of really like great stuff, super fortunate, has all of the expected kind of anxieties going through the process, but the excitements as well. There's also just kind of a lot of waiting around, and then this kind of like great thing happens, like you reaching out and I'll be like, how did I get to do this? This is so cool. So, it's definitely been strange. I was telling friends when the book came out last year, like, I don't know what to compare this to in terms of a life event, because, it's this thing you work on for years and then it's out in the world. And initially it feels somewhat anticlimactic, but then again, you have these kind of moments of interest and excitement. But it's a part of you and it isn't a part of you. It's now being shared with other people. So it's a strange experience. So happy to get to live through this and to be here for it. So it's been really exciting overall.
Give me like one of your favorite memories. Like what was something that happened that maybe you didn't expect, or just something that you're going to like kind of take with you forever?
Oh man. I guess two things that jump out. One was I did an event in Arizona, in Scottsdale, Arizona, at the Poison Pen bookstore, which is an awesome bookstore that I go to with my mom a lot. And seeing so many people who I played football with when I was younger come out to the event and be so excited for me was like so unexpected and so just much fun. It was like just such a great night. And so that was really, really big. And then I got to go, very fortunately, to the National Book Festival in DC. And we had an event in the Library of Congress. And I just remember being in there with my wife, like in one of the reading rooms, and just feeling so grateful for books and that this institution existed. And it was just such a great event. So I think those are like two things, really unexpected things that happened kind of through the book release that just I think about a lot, for sure.
I love it, man. I just sometimes think about it. It's like a volcano that's been like erupting underwater, and then finally it breaks the surface. And like once the volcano is above the surface of the sea, like it's sort of there forever. I mean, I would just say, like, for me, I mean, I have a lot of my own memories, but like that's been one of the most gratifying things. Is just like you're sort of, there is a finally, like, I've made it to the other side, and like now I'm out there, and like I mean, like being coming on this show, not that this show is, you know, comparable to like the National Book Festival, but it's like, you know, it's just nice to finally, after working so long unseen and unknown, you kind of cross over to the other side.
Oh, I mean, definitely. And writing is such a lonely thing, and being a writer is such a lonely thing. So to be able to have these moments where you kind of come up for air and get to talk to someone about the work, and someone like yourself who's done it and knows what it's like and has gone through it, this is kind of the things that you wait for, the things that you look forward to. So yeah, I'm super, super excited about this.
Awesome. All right, well, let's dig into the book. So first, why not, for those who haven't read Last Acts, just give us a thumbnail sketch.
Yeah. So father and son own a gun store on the outskirts of Phoenix, Arizona. Gun store's not doing great. Rizzo, the father, feels like things are going to improve now that he's been reunited with his son, who recently overdosed from heroin. The two work together to create the greatest television commercial of all time. Initially, there's some success, but then things don't go as planned. And from there, kind of Nick is the son, forced to take on more of a father role and kind of hold the family together.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, I love father-son stories, and I'm always interested, you know, as, you know, a son who, thank goodness my father is still alive, and I have 3 sons of my own and a daughter, but like that, you know, fathers and sons is something I think about a lot. And I think from what I've read, that is like really was the kernel of the book. Like you wanted to write a father-son story. Tell us why.
Yeah, I think it felt like one of the most important relationships in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And so knowing how much my father means to me, knowing how much kind of everyone thinks about their father, whether or not they have their father in their life or not, it's this kind of giant presence. And so trying to figure out how to negotiate that for me felt really, really important. So I just knew that there was a lot of kind of rich emotional territory for me to try to explore. And when writing fiction, I feel like when I start with a relationship that has a lot of meaning for me and the stakes feel super high, when I'm making stuff up, when I'm having all this, you know, absurd and fantastical shit happen, it kind of keeps the emotional core there when I know, like, hey, this is what started it, right? This is what's behind everything. So it just felt like a place that had a lot of heat and a lot of energy, and I was like, let me keep looking at this, let me keep trying to see, like, what do I have to say about this. But I think just to kind of ramble a little bit more on that, like one of the challenges in trying to write about it was the kind of lack of communication between those two figures, right? The father and the son. So felt like a challenge to represent in fiction. Like, how do these people express how they feel when they can't express how they feel, when they don't have a language for how they feel? And so trying to kind of tease that out over the course of a book was a neat formal challenge. But again, it was like definitely more of a thing for me where it was like, hey, this is a relationship really important in my life. Let me start here and then figure out how I can make this more interesting as a novel.
Yeah. I mean, for me, relationships are, you know, one of the top, if not the top thing that novels do really well. And it's sort of what I read for. I think kind of the psychology and the layers of relationships is often, I find, A, what's most interesting, and B, like when a novel is not interesting to me and I want to put a novel down, I will often diagnose it as being, there wasn't really a relationship there. That I was keyed in on, or that I was trying to like figure out, or the character was trying to figure out. You know, you said it was like hot emotional territory for you. What would you say the emotions were? Like what, if you could name them?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the case of these characters, and I guess kind of what I was thinking about as well, was just this a sense of hopelessness in general, like this kind of you know, the book is set initially in 2014. It jumps ahead to 2017. But I think, you know, these are two men who in the book are kind of looking at their lives and are unsatisfied, and are kind of unsatisfied with each other as well, and aren't able to communicate that. Don't know why they feel so incomplete. And I think going through my 20s, that was definitely a feeling that I kind of constantly had. It was kind of like, what's missing for me? And then the kind of first person you look at is your father, and start to wonder about him. So I think there was some of that there, but besides just kind of the hopelessness, I would say love, like a deep, deep love that just isn't easy to communicate. And I think it's so hard to tell someone that you love them, in a way that's not the kind of obvious romantic way we're maybe familiar with, but in the way of a family, and a quiet family. And in this case, in Last Acts, the father and son are the entire family unit. And so Rizzo's been left by his wife. He really, in some ways, was left by his son as his son struggled with his addiction. So his son is his entire world now, and yet that's complicated because he also has resentment toward him. So yeah, the kind of the fullness, the richness of this kind of like really tough to express love, and this love that isn't just pure euphoria and isn't romantic, but it's just like, this is my family. This is who I'm with in the world. This is the only person, for better or worse, who's going to understand me. Wanting to try to kind of foreground that in the novel, and then really just explore it as the external pressures keep coming down on these two characters, on this family unit. So yeah, the hopelessness and the love, those are the two things.
Yeah, well, I mean, those are like two sides of the same thing. I mean, there's hope in that, like, this other person could be my salvation, and there's hope that there is love there. And then when the love is not expressed, or seems to not be there, or seems to be crushed by externalities, then you get the hopelessness and the despair. I was thinking about father-son stories generally, and I was thinking about how, like, there's not a ton of father-son stories that are, you see around. I mean, you do see, a lot of mother-daughter stories, sister stories. You even see father-daughter stories a fair amount. You see buddy stories, like, two guys, but not necessarily father-son. But I was trying to think, like, what are the great father-son stories? So there's The Road by Cormac McCarthy is a great one. The Odyssey with Odysseus and Telemachus. There's The Godfather with Vito and Michael. I would say the New Testament is a good one.
Nice.
Jesus and his father.
Yeah.
But one that might hit close to home, I think Lincoln and the Bardo is a father-son story, But still, it took a bit of thinking to kind of like come up with some father-son stories. And I guess I'm just wondering if you sensed a kind of absence and you were writing into that, or you just kind of like, this is what was interesting to you and you weren't really thinking about the context.
No, I think I was thinking about the context as well. I think I was reading a lot of mother-daughter stories too, and just loving them and thinking about like, what's my version of that? And so the one that comes to mind that I've talked about a lot is Florida by Christine Scott. And she's one of my favorite writers, like amazing sentence writer, but writes about a really complicated mother-daughter relationship over a kind of large period of time. And it's really impressive and ambitious, but also compressed. And so that book was definitely on my mind. One father-son story that I read pretty late, but Ivan Turgenev has that great book. I think it's Fathers and Sons.
Yeah, of course. Yep.
And that's just a really hilarious. It's a duel. It's got the son brings home a nihilist. Like, it's just great. It's a great, hilarious father-son story. But I think it's certainly a story and a kind of relationship that felt like very kind of right to explore now. And so I was reading these other things and just kind of, again, thinking like, well, what would be my version of this? Do I have something to say? I know this is an important relationship for me. So like, what would that mean? And trying to kind of push myself toward that.
So this book does take on some pretty big issues. I mean, guns in America, gun culture, that's a big topic. The opioid crisis and opioid addiction, drug addiction, and recovery is in this book. But like another topic that has sort of been mentioned some in the conversation around this book, but I don't think is sort of like as directly addressed in the book, is this conversation around masculinity and like men today. And like, I mean, it's a huge topic that's always talked about. I don't know. I have mixed feelings about the way the conversation goes, but I think it's fair to say that like a lot of people are thinking about, as Americans today, what kind of men are we trying to raise, and what should those men be doing in the world. And I think that's things that both men and women think a great deal about. And I just was like, I want to kind of open-ended question that to you and just say, like, is that something that you were trying to write into? And B, just sort of, even if not, how do you think your book sort of fits into all that?
Yeah. It's so tough, man. It's like,
dude, it's tough. It's a tough topic. Sorry.
I was talking to someone about this, and they were just like, we were doing an event and they were going to kind of call the event, something have masculinity in the title, but they're like, masculinity just feels like such a dirty word right now. And so I don't really want to have the event labeled. Yeah. I was like, cool, whatever you're comfortable with. It's like, I understand that. And I think I don't ever want to seem didactic, right? Like that's so I have to separate like what I think the book is doing from like what my own feelings on the subject are. And I think for the book, it's certainly about masculinity. It's about white straight men in America today. And it's trying in the book to kind of go beyond those labels as much as possible and to consider like, what does this actually mean for these two individuals who have these identities? So I think I don't want to try to kind of limit what the book is doing by talking about kind of my own feelings about masculinity. But I do think this has been a really important part of like my own life. I grew up in a really kind of like hyper masculine environment playing. My dad put me in wrestling when I was like 6 years old. It was like a childhood fight club, basically. Like all these like Italian guys were just yelling at us while we were like headlocking each other at the CLCF in Cranston, Rhode Island. So grew up playing football. My dad and I, we had weights in the garage. We were always lifting weights together. Like that was just kind of what we did. And I didn't kind of think about I didn't think about reading books and writing as a very masculine thing at all, or something that was available to me when I was growing up. And so I think like one thing that I'm really excited about now, just being able to kind of share my book with people, is just to say like, this is something that everybody should be like. I think that writing is important to understand your own emotional life. And I think that's something when you're growing up in this really kind of strict masculine environment that doesn't allow you to have the space for your feelings, you don't get to kind of really engage with that and to think about that. And so writing is a way to do that. And that's great. And I also think books, obviously, so important to kind of challenge your conception of who you are, have empathy for people. But again, like not something that I, as a young football playing kid, thought was a good use of my time. And I have no one to blame for that but myself. And so like now getting to be a person who's reading books, like I tell my nephew all the time, like, let's go, let's hit the books, let's read. We're always reading together. And I love that. I love that I get to do that with him and be that sort of influence in his life. So taking a really kind of circuitous route to your question, I would just say, in the book, I'm trying to not be didactic, to go beyond those labels, but to consider as much as I can in the most like nuanced and compelling way possible, like who are these men in America right now? Why do they feel this way, and what is going on with them? In my own life, I think this is something that I'm actively kind of thinking through and figuring out. And I think it's just a great thing that people are having these conversations, and that people like you, Mark, are having people on the Thoughtful Bro to talk about stuff like this. And just happy to be a part of it. Yeah.
So I want to. This is a topic that has come up for faithful listeners of the show. It's come up a fair amount recently. I have had a string of guys on the show. Frankly, it's just by total coincidence. But like, I have been bringing up with guys this topic, which is like a thing out there now, which is like not only it's a kind of a sub genre of the masculinity discussion, which is the masculinity discussion within publishing and writing and reading, which is the fact that very few, relatively speaking, and from a historical perspective, very few men are getting into writing these days, and fewer men are reading fiction. Guys that I know who are kind of civilians in the writing world, they are reading nonfiction. They're reading maybe like a business book or a self-help book or a history book and so on. But they're not reading fiction. And I think it's, just there's the data is out there that like women have made incredible strides to the point where about, I think just rough numbers, 80% of the publishing industry is female, 80% of the customer base for publishing is female. So my question to you is, you're a guy, you're not only a guy, but like you are like a real broy guy, as you just described, lifting weights and playing. I think you played a little college football as well. You are a real ass athlete. And it's like, yet here you are, going to this prestigious MFA program, publishing this very, avant-garde kind of like experimental literary work. We can argue about those adjectives later if we want, but, you're a little bit unusual, I would say. And I guess my question to you is a question I often ask myself, like, how did we end up here? Clearly you and I both love the same thing, right? But it's strange the way the industry has shifted over to become so female dominated, and there's kind of so few men in it. I'm just kind of curious for your take on that.
Yeah, the industry part itself, I'm not sure how to explain that. It probably, to me, starts with something like childhood literacy, which is something I think that's kind of behind what we're talking about now. But I think I've thought about this question a lot, right? Like, how do I go from, again, I don't want to call myself a great athlete because I played with some great athletes. I am a very mediocre, flat-footed athlete. I did play junior college football, played with some great athletes, had an offer to Panhandle State in Dumas, Texas. You can look that up.
Dude, don't knock Panhandle State, man.
Yeah. But I would say, to me, the kind of the through line of my life is a kind of search for transcendence. And that sounds like super, super dramatic, and it is. But I think like writing and great literature, like that's what it does for me, is it takes me completely somewhere else. And when I think about like when I squatted 565 pounds, like I was leaving my own body to do that, like that was an insane thing. So I think that as I kind of consider all these different parts about my life, like there's that kind of through line of this searching for something, this kind of seeking to understand. And I think like being put in sports early on, like you're constantly deciding like, how do I rank? How do I compare? Who am I in this group? And that was something, again, for me, I didn't decide to do those things when I was, 6, 7, 10, 11, 12, whatever. Like that was just kind of what it was expected that I would do. But then as I started to ask questions of myself, what do I actually enjoy about this? What do I want to continue doing? It seems like, of course, I would have gone into books or something like that when I think about what really mattered to me most in those things I was doing at the young age.
Dude, I love this answer so much because like I often am like trying to look for a way to kind of pitch literature to other men and pitch fiction, and this idea of transcendence. Certainly like kind of tying it to the transcendence you feel with great physical exertion. That's something that a lot of guys think about. But saying like, hey, literature is like a spiritual version of that.
Yeah.
That is a pitch for me that I really like. That really lands for me. And I think, here's the thing. I was speaking earlier about kind of like what I love most about fiction is like psychological relationships and kind of psychological precision and peeling back layers. That is not a great pitch to a man. Because I think men don't understand how important relationships are. And I think most men could be a lot better in their relationships and expressing their emotions. But it's like, it's not like a kind of easy, like, yeah, you should understand your feelings a little bit better. Men wouldn't respond to that as well as like, hey, I used to squat 500 pounds and I left my body. Literature is like squatting 500 pounds. Men would be like, oh, go on,
Yeah.
So I love that. All right, so let's talk about the book itself and the style of the book, which is so striking. I described it a moment ago as avant-garde. Certainly some of the people, you went to Syracuse in their MFA program, which is like, maybe now the most prestigious MFA program in the country. It's certainly up there. But you talked about the influence of Saunders there, who was a professor of yours, Dana Spiotta, also Don DeLillo. But I've also heard you talk about real avant-garde people like Jean-Luc Godard, Samuel Beckett. Yeah. And the book did feel like it was trying to push the envelope stylistically. There was a lot of formal innovation. And I guess to kind of put this into a question, what is your take on literature that caters to the reader on one hand and challenges the reader on the other? Like, how do you see like the role of the author in their relationship to the reader in that way?
Yeah, I don't know that I see those two things as opposed. I think that they're very closely related, and that for me, you have to feel like someone's challenging you in a meaningful way, and they're not just challenging you to be cruel or to be a show off or to just do something formally for the sake of doing it. I think that, like, for me, like, I love Nabokov, right? And he's so challenging, and it's so rewarding, and it's so fun, and it's so strange, and the language that is, and everything. But so I think for me, I see kind of the relationship with the reader, and the way I try to start the book off is like, kick the door down, come in as hard as you can right from the beginning, and let them know, like, hey, this is the ride. Like, you're coming on it or you're not. And it's like, for me, that's how I want to. That's the kind of book I want to walk into. So it's like, that's the one I wanted to write, and I want the reader to feel that they're with me the whole way, but always feeling like the book is, pushing somewhere and leading somewhere, because there's something real at stake, which is, again, this father and son, this emotional relationship, right? So I think, again, I don't want to see those two things as exclusive. I want to see them as very closely related, and it's a matter of like, when do you lean on more of which to try to like make the point that you need to make, or push the story where it needs to go.
There's a lot of different styles in the book. It's a multimedia book. There's like, there's tweets, and there's like a script for a commercial, and lots of different kind of writing styles in there. I'm just wondering, like, what is your view on, why are those multimedia things able to achieve something that a straight narrative, a straight kind of traditional narrative would not? I mean, first, just to answer the question, like, did you ever try writing this kind of in just a straightforward way, like kind of beginning to end chronological traditional narrative? And then just kind of from there, just talk about like why you think that this kind of structure and these kinds of kind of experimental elements help you get where you're going.
Yeah, I think for certain features, like the commercial is a great example, right? So there's a script within the book. Definitely tried writing more of that scene and less of the script, and kind of having that play out. And what I felt like, each kind of formal decision has its own set of logic that justifies it being in the book, hopefully, right, if it's successful. And I think in the case of that specific script, it allowed Nick, for the first time in the book, to feel more like a main character, whereas his dad had kind of been the one looming really large. So it was this way to kind of like shift the focus for the reader without it feeling arbitrary, but then also having it kind of be fun. Like there's a real kind of push of energy when you have one of those formal shifts and the language feels a little bit different. You're like, wait a minute, where am I now? So trying to take advantage of that experience while also trying to give maybe a secondary character like a bigger stage. So I think there's that. I think the other reason why, especially in this book, like the tweets, the kind of like spam emails that come in the second half, those are representing a kind of a different consciousness, right? So the first half of the book is really in Rizzo's consciousness. It's written more in kind of like straightforward, close third person. And what I wanted to show, kind of dividing the book into this kind of like 2-act structure, was this kind of variation on a theme, right? Where we're seeing this kind of like similar story arc in the second half of the book from Nick's perspective, this downward slide, but it's being refracted differently because it's coming from this perspective that's grown up so differently than his father. So I think I try to make those formal decisions based on the characters as much as possible,
Mm-hmm.
how I think they're kind of working through the world, but then also kind of what I think will allow me to kind of get a lot of the story in as a kind of compressed form as possible.
Yeah.
So both of those things, I think in general, it's something I enjoy so much as a reader. So like any kind of reason I can find to justify making a shift like that, I'm willing to explore it and try it. Not always successful, like definitely stuff I'll cut out and leave. And I'm prone to kind of like being excessive. So a lot of it ends up as I revise being scaled back.
Yeah.
I think a person who does this so well, I think, is Jenny Awful. And her book, Department of Speculation, is like maybe one of the first books that I think I read where so much was happening off stage and just in these little fragments, there are these whole worlds contained there. And so it really challenged what I thought about like what we need to actually see as a reader and like the emotional experience of absence when you know something's happened, but you're not seeing it happen on the page. That creates its own kind of distance and emotional register for the reader. So yeah, another rambly answer, but I hope.
No, I love it. It's great, and I know you're sort of you're working on film, like a script for this, right? And it does have a kind of. So first of all, I want to say it has a visual quality. I think that like I didn't try listening to the audiobook, but I can like reading the book, like the way the prose is laid out and the different sections, it does convey its own kind of energy. But also I could just see how a film director would see it and be like, there's so many kind of different ways to get at this story, right? There's so many, it's like, there's this perspective and there's this perspective. And it's not necessarily a perspective of like through this character's eyes. There is that, but there's also kind of like, the perspective from the people on Twitter and the perspective from the film crew and so on and so forth. It's very, very novel kind of POVs.
Yeah.
So I just want to I sometimes like to really get my literary nerd hat on and unpack something, but I'm a big Samuel Beckett fan. And first of all, I want to say so your cat is named Godot, correct?
Yes. Yep. And I proposed to my wife before we went and saw Waiting for Godot at Lincoln Center in 2018. Yeah, 2018. And I just went and saw. They did a Beckett shorts at the Irish Repertory Theater recently. They did Craps Last Tape, which is my favorite short play of Beckett's, and it was one of the greatest artistic experiences of my entire life.
Oh my God! Now hold on. So that you proposed to your wife, and then she said yes, clearly, and then did you go to the play? And she's just like, but doesn't she want to call her mom or whatever? It's just no. We're watching Beckett.
We got to go watch Beckett. We'll do that later. This is priorities, man.
That's some serious fandom. All right, so here we go. So on Beckett, I think it's really interesting the similarities that this has with Beckett. I mean, certainly there's a kind of superficial similarity in the spare language, but I think there's ultimately some real similarities with Waiting for Godot in the characters. And I would say that so just 4 similarities that I'll give is, so overall, I think there's this kind of climate of futility. I mean, you've got these kind of 2 characters who are striving in an absurd world. And it's just sort of they're trying, but they sort of also know it's impossible. And they're barely going to get there, if ever. You have 2 characters who are stuck together who also sort of can't stand each other. They talk to each other a lot, but there is no matter how articulate they may be, there's they're just missing each other, and you feel like they're not even really hearing each other or understanding each other. And then also, I think there's that little green leaf of hope. I mean, there is this feeling that these 2, although they are stuck together in this futile world, they are each other's only hope. And and sort of you leave the thing and you're like, well, as bad as it is, at least those 2 are still together, So how do you take that read on comparing this to Beckett?
Oh, it's 100%. Yeah. I think that's what's always remained with me about his work. How funny, how absurd, how hopeless, but still the ultimate commitment, I think, to something hopeful, even if it's so small and so spare. it's that's to me, it's just so beautiful. And I've always, it's this kind of like great story that I'm just looking for my own way to try to tell. And I've told this to a friend, but that's how, Dee Dee and Go-Go, I think about Rizzo and Nick is like, they're waiting for each other, rather than waiting for someone else. Like they're waiting for each other to be the person they want him to be. And it's accepting who he is. Right. So
we are Godot.
Yes.
All right. So I want to talk also about your revision style and sort of like get into, as we close up the interview here, some kind of craft things. I heard you talk once about, you're talking about Philip Roth, and Philip Roth apparently said, you got to get the first 100 pages right. And if, you the first 100 pages are right, I won't say it doesn't matter, but it's like everything starts there. And certainly the rest won't be right if the first 100 pages aren't right. That's like the only chance you've got is to get those right. And then I heard you say like, well, why not then the first 50? Why not the first 20? Why not even the first word and make sure the first word is perfect? I mean, I've never heard somebody say that, like, I got to get the first word. I got to nail the first word. But I guess a few things about that. So one is, I had one of your mentors, George Saunders, on the show, and I asked him this, and I've repeated this anecdote many times because it really sticks with me. But I said, you got a lot of students in your classes. Like, what are the two things, or what are some qualities that show you that somebody will make it, right? And he said, well, there's two. One is a willingness to revise, and the other is an attention to causality in the narrative. So I want to focus on willingness to revise, because I think that, like, certainly you have that. Talk to me about, how you revise, the intensity of your revision, and how serious you are about, like, even the first word has got to be right.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm super committed to that. An obsessive freak. I just will reread. I'll spend a week just rereading the same page over and over and over, like 8 hours a day of doing that. Like I'm a person, basically. That's what I want to do here. So for me, it was really easy to be prone to revision, because I'm like, oh, isn't this what we all do all the time in our head? And it's like, well, not normal people, but that is the process. Like I'm trying to get a really kind of controlled set of words down on the page, not hate myself while I'm doing that, so that I can spend as much time as possible trying to rework it. And I think a lot about, as I revise, someone I've gotten more into as of late, who's helped me a lot in kind of thinking about revision, is John Cassavetes. And I read a great book of his, of interviews with him, called Cassavetes on Cassavetes, that Ray Carney put together. And he would have his actors kind of redo these scenes in all of these different ways over and over and over again. And his style was described as very improvisational, but it wasn't. It was constantly rehearsed, right? And I think for revision, trying to kind of approach it, or kind of trying to retroactively understand my approach in those terms of, like, I'll write something, I'll have a scene, I'm like, oh yeah, but what if it was done in a more comedic way? And then, like, all right, let's try it that way. And it's like, all right, what if it was a little sadder? Let's rewrite it that way. So it's like I'm rewriting the same bit over and over again, trying to put these like different spins on the ball each time. And then by doing that over and over and over again and making these little adjustments, I'll eventually like be left with something that has a little bit of the qualities I wanted from all these different approaches. And I'll be like, oh yeah, this is where it needs to be. I can go on now.
It is so funny that you say that, because like I have often done that very same thing. Like I'll just look at a scene and I'll think of it like I'm a director, and I'll be like, I'll be like, in my mind, I'm like talking to my character. I'm like, guys, this just isn't working. Like, could you be a little bit more over the top? Right. Could you be a little bit like, could you take some more risk, or whatever it is? Right. But it's, I've never heard another person say that.
Yeah. It was reading Cassavetes, that process of his, I was like, yeah, I think this is what I've been trying to do, or how I've been trying to explain this to myself. Yeah. And, for me, it allows me to figure out what I'm doing, because like I try to go in with as little, very George-like, not any preconceived ideas of like what I'm hoping to get out of this, just maybe some kind of initial relationship or language that I want to explore. But then it's like, oh yeah, this is what I keep coming back to, even as I make these different changes, these different attempts. This is what I want to carry forward. And so it helps me figure out what's most important about the work and doing that too.
Well, it begs the question, though, like for somebody who revises so intensely and is trying all these things, how do you know when you got it? How do you know when, like, hey, we take 162, that was the take?
I know it's such a dangerous game to play, and I think I like to think you'll like eventually you'll just know. Like anything else, it's this kind of intuitive thing. It's feeling based. It's very mystical. I was listening to the episode recently with Colin McCann, and I love him, and I think I share a lot of his philosophies about writing, uh, especially the kind of like there is this element that just goes unexplained, right? There is this element that no matter how hard we try to crack it, there's this feeling based, like this is musical, like there is this sort of like way you move through it, and you kind of come to terms with that on your own. And I think knowing when you're done is one of those like mystical unexplainable things where it's like you'll hit that point and you'll know, and maybe you'll be wrong. Right? There have definitely been times where I've thought I was done with something and wasn't done with it, and I had to figure it out the way. But that's okay, that's all part of the process.
It's so funny. Like, so I do readings for my book now when I do a reading sometimes, and I totally edit on the fly.
Oh, yeah.
Like I just, I'm reading my book, that manuscript that I've read like 10,000 times, and I'm like just changing it on the fly during a reading. Anyway, I want to ask you about the role of the novel. You said you were asked in an interview. It's a very striking bit of copy I'm about to read you that came from your mind, and I want to ask you to explain it, sir. You were asked, what do you think the role of the novel is in the 21st century? And here is your answer in full. I think its role is to have no role. The novel is utterly useless to our current moment in history. DeLillo talked about this, considered the idea in Mao too, and I think he's right. It's liberating. There's no pressure. I can take risks formally. I can be provocative. It's of such little consequence that I feel guilty, like I'm spending my adult life acting like a kid. So, as somebody myself who is like ambitious for the novel and like hopes to be part of a movement that returns the novel, or at least brings it for the first time in American culture to cultural primacy, who believes that the novel can change hearts and minds. Tell me about your kind of very Beckett-like sense of futility in writing novels.
Yeah, and again, it is a DeLillo idea for sure. So it's Beckett, DeLillo. I think the way I think about it is more in terms of like the broadest cultural definition, right? To people walking down the street today, not in New York, for most Americans and most people all over the world, novels are not going to make a tremendous difference in their life. I want the same thing you want. And I think I'm trying to, in some ways, steel myself against disappointment from not achieving that.
I get that.
Like a real, kind of cowardly way to take this. But I also don't want to like overestimate or self-aggrandize my own role in the world. Like I'm a writer, and that I think is really important to other writers and to readers. But I think like everyone's going to be okay if they don't read my book. Like that's they're going to make it, and civilization's going to make it. And so I don't want to like overestimate and try to force myself to be in the middle of something I shouldn't be. But when I say all of that about the novel's like reduced role, it's not to say that like I view the novel as being any less important to me or to people I know who are writing something. Like the novel has given my life so much meaning, and I wouldn't want it to be any other way, and it won't be any other way. I love reading now more than I did as a kid. So I feel very lucky in that regard. But I think to most people and most of people's kind of literacy education, the way like literacy is kind of approached now, what kids had to go through during COVID, being educated during that time, like there are a lot of hurdles ahead for literacy. And that's not a reason to kind of like assume the death of the novel. People have been saying that the novel's dead for a very long time, and it never has been. So I'm sure it'll continue to operate in its very hyper-specific, relegated role. Will become antique collectors at a certain point. Like that's how
No, Alexander. We're on the rise, man.
But
We're
yes.
coming up.
But it really, it's done. That doesn't, I don't think that takes away what it means to the people who love these things. I think it like, the less people who care about this, the more I'm like, this is what I love. I will defend this and keep practicing and keep pursuing my craft. Like that's never going to change. But I just, I heard you and Colin talking about kind of optimism, and I consider myself an optimist as well. But I think I am like so prone to cynicism about a lot of this stuff. But I should also say, a very smart man that I heard once talking, he said, if something isn't useful to our society, that's a good thing, because look at our society. And I'm like, the novel, it doesn't have any practical use. It's not going to make Elon and his friends any richer, maybe, I hope, but like it is going to do a lot for the people who love reading these books, and that's a great thing. So it's a I have my tongue somewhat in my cheek. I'm always hedging myself, but I think there's belief, there's cynicism. I'm somewhere in the middle,
I know, and there's a little bit of kind of emotional self-preservation there, which I totally get. It's funny. I was thinking about this recently, and I was about this kind of question, and I posed the question to myself this way: like, what would you like if you could be if you were made this offer? You're gonna be able to. I'll show you the best movie, the consensus greatest film of the next 10 years, or I will show you the greatest novel of the next 10 years, assuming, there's some kind of consensus, right? Or like the greatest, whatever it is, right? The greatest painting, the greatest photograph, the greatest, blah, 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 right? And I was like, I'll just take the greatest novel every single time, because while I think that there's way more bad novels, and definitely this is true, because there's way more novels, period, than say films. But like, I would just say, like, for me, and this is sort of what it gets down to, it struck me, I started thinking about this when you were saying how much novels mean to us, the practitioners, and, the kind of whatever portion of society really loves this too. There's something about a story in the written word form that, can stick with you and like just get way down deep in like the control room of your soul. And it's a place that movies, and I find other media, just can't enter.
Yeah. Well, I think reading requires so much more of the consumer, right? And so of the reader than the viewer, than the listener. So I think the experience of reading is something that can't be compared to watching, to listening. Yeah. That's a reason that turns people away. But to me, it's what makes books so fun and so enriching, and why those stories stay, and why we continue to reread things that were written 100 years ago and are just blown away by them. Like that's such an incredible thing, and it's specific to books.
Yeah. All right. I want to talk for a second about Syracuse. So I'm I like sports. I know you played sports. I bet you really like sports. I was thinking about, I like rivalries, right? Like Michigan, Ohio State, Army, Navy, Auburn, Alabama. And I sort of feel like if there isn't a rivalry brewing between Iowa and Syracuse MFA, like I want to create that rivalry, and I want it to be like somehow expressed in some kind of like bracket form.
Like football game. I think that's
right.
Exactly. Alumni hopefully will be involved.
That would be hilarious. It's sort of hilarious to think of that. But anyway, I just think it's really interesting that, I mean, for so long, and no shade on Iowa. I mean, Iowa's great, but it's like for so long, Iowa was like the New York Yankees of MFA programs for just really decades and decades. Arguably, it's still that way today. But I think Syracuse, you got Jonathan D., Mona Awad, George Saunders, Dan Espiata. You got a lot of great people there. And the people coming out of there, I mean, it's just the people who were there when you were there. This is like some kind of crazy. We were talking in the green room. It's sort of like when like Spielberg and Brian De Palma and like George Lucas were all at USC at the same time. It's like lately there's been a crazy group of writers that came out of Syracuse, right?
Yeah.
All right, so who are some of them? Just name them for me.
I mean, a couple that I think everyone probably knows: Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah, Alexander Chang, Anthony Vesna-So, who very tragically passed away recently. Frankie Barnett, Miriam Lacroix, and those are just like the people who had books come out recently. Like
Right.
everybody in that program, top to bottom, was so talented. And it was really, for me, I got in basically due to a clerical error. I was on the wait list, at the bottom of the wait list. Some people had gone ahead for me on the wait list, and someone who was supposed to go, I had basically not gotten in. I was working at a lottery machine factory in Rhode Island at the time, in the assembly line. Swear to God. And
how perfect, by the way.
and I got a call. I was at work, got a call in August. It was like 3 weeks before the semester started.
Oh my God.
Hey, somebody dropped out, and so you're up if you want the spot. You can kind of get up here. That's
kidding.
like, I'm here. Now let's go.
Yeah.
So that was it. But so point being, there was a reason that I didn't get in that first kind of application process. The people there were just so talented, and it was really inspiring to see that, and also really intimidating. And I think it was a great place to learn and to study and to get to talk with other artists, and it was a lot of fun. Like we had a really good
I mean, it's like there's like 600 people who apply for like 6 spots in each. It's like being a Navy SEAL or something.
Yeah.
It's like I'm just kind of curious, like, it sounds like, so it's like a 3-year program. There's six in each class. So kind of at any time, there's like 18 people sort of that you get to know. I'm just kind of curious, like for those of us who can never go to the Syracuse MFA program, just like characterize it, like, just like give me like an anecdote or some way to describe what it was like to go through that with such a high quality group of professors and fellow students.
Yeah, I feel like people have some sense of it because of George. George is so generous, and that's one of the things I think about the most is just his ability to just be everything to everybody and to open himself up. And so I would say, for those who haven't been to Syracuse, New York, like the setting is definitely part of the story. Like it is a cold, snowy, beautiful Rust Belt city in upstate New York. And it's a great place to sit inside and read, And so it was a place where it felt like kind of books were the most important thing. And I feel like every single person who taught there, the quality they all shared was a commitment to their craft. And there was very little talk of publishing. I feel like almost kind of never talked about kind of agents and what happened after. It was something we were all really curious about, but the kind of consensus was like, just focus on your work and let that take care of itself. Yeah. And I think that's kind of a really helpful approach. It's just kind of like focusing on the work, like letting the work be the work.
And I sometimes have a cheeky segment I do called the 2-minute MFA when I have somebody who's a teacher of writing, and I'm just like, give me your best, advice. And I'm happy to ask you that. I mean, you're not technically a teacher of writing, but I would also like to ask you maybe like, you had such a wealth of professors and fellow students who now have also not only been writers, but have become professors as well. Give me like the best piece of advice that you heard from one of them during that time.
It was just never give up. Like that's it. I know it sounds so cliche and so obvious, and it is, but like it's so easy. I mean, I had a person I met in the program who graduated like, some years before me, and he told me, the most talented person that was in my cohort isn't writing anymore, and that was kind of that's a common thing, right? There are so many reasons to not write. There are so many demands, financial demands, family demands, personal demands. There's so many reasons, but I think if you can just find a way to keep carving out a little bit of time, and like a little bit of work every day amounts to so much over a large period of time. So it's just like sticking with it and hanging in there, and just enjoying the work as much as you can, because that's all you have.
And believing, as Colin McCann said last week, it's all shit until it's not, right? You just like, you keep going, and it's just so terrible. And then one day, all of a sudden, it's like, it's not terrible anymore. Yeah. All right. So we have time for, I think, one question from the audience. I love this question. Thank you, everybody, for all the questions. But how does your dad feel about you being a professional novelist? Ooh, I love this.
Yeah, thank you for that question. It's a great one. I think he's really, really proud of me. I think for a long time, he was really kind of confused and was just like, what? Because, you know, as Mark was saying at the start of the show, it's this thing that's happening in private so much. So you tell people you're writing and it's like, well, what do you have to show for that? What can you actually, like a shitty Word doc? Like, I'm not going to send my dad, you know, that. So, but I think seeing the book out in the world, seeing how other people react to it is something that he's just really proud of and excited by. And that obviously brings me a ton of joy.
Yeah. I think male writers and their dads is like one of the most complex things, you know. I mean, it's just it's always an interesting question to a male writer. What does your dad think about you being a novelist?
Yep.
All right. Well, look, hey, folks, thank you everybody who joined. Alexander, thank you for being with us here today, folks. The book's called Last Acts. Again, Samuel Beckett meets Tony Soprano. I don't think there's a better recommendation you will hear all year for any book. Alexander, I end the show every week asking people this question. Imagine the ideal reader for Last Acts, somebody who is just kind of getting everything that you're up to in this fabulous kind of experimental book. They're picking up everything you're putting down. They get to the end, close the book, they look out the window. Tell us in a phrase or even just a single word, how does this reader feel?
Yeah. I imagine them smiling, but with little tears in their eyes. You know, that's kind of what the sense I think is, especially at the end.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful, man. I would like that for my book too. I'm gonna write towards that, Alexander.
That's the whole ambition. Yeah.
All right. Well, Alexander, thank you so much for making the time. Everybody in the audience, thank you for turning up. Again, the book is called Last Acts by Alexander Sammartino. Go ahead and buy it on bookshop.org. All the links are in the chat. And we will see you next week on Thoughtful Bro. Thanks, Alexander.
Thank you so much, Mark. This was wonderful.